the Reichstag fire, looking at this as a lawyer concerned with history. In 1933 in Germany, the Weimar Republic had existed for 13 years. After the German Empire had been defeated in the First War, the new republic formed a federal state guaranteeing basic democratic rights. The police were controlled by the different states. There were elections to be held in all the states. The process by which this democratic state turned into something else was not overnight. It took a slow process. The German word for it was Gleichschaltung, which can be translated as coordination or bringing things into line. In 1930, the world economic crisis hit India, and under the Constitution, the president had the right to rule by decree in times of emergency. And the decrees that they used first were to introduce, at a time of economic distress, severe budget control, no state aid. This caused ever-increasing tension. People who had lost everything had no way of even getting by. And the bourgeois parties that in the center controlled and dominated the republic lost their votes. They lost them in two directions. They lost them to the left, to the communists, and they lost them to the right, to the Nazis. The Nazis, in this democratic period, when they were contesting elections, actually attempted to deal with the distress of the people suffering from the Depression. And the stormtroopers were initially a kind of employment for people who couldn't get employment otherwise. And they constituted a form of social charities for the families of these people, because the state was not providing them. They built a structure. In 1930, in the election, they suddenly appeared out of nowhere with 20% of the vote. In 1932, there were two elections. They got 30% of the vote in each. They did not win a majority in the parliament because Germany had proportional representation. But they were by far the largest party. Unable to form a government, but neither was anybody else. So the president, an old general named Hindenburg, was continuing to rule by decree with right-wing ex-army officers who he knew, but who had no base in the parliament. Two governments came and fell without any basis. The only thing that's important for our story right now is that one of these governments took the elected government of Prussia, which was the biggest state. And remember, the states had control of the police. It had 60% of all the police in Germany. And under a decree by the president, put it under direct control. Then in January 30th, 1933, the president turned to Hitler to take over the government. He persuaded the president by saying he wanted only two posts for the Nazis. The Interior Ministry, which in Germany at that point, remember, the police are under local control, did not amount to quite as much as it otherwise would, and a minister without portfolio, the number 2 Nazi, Goering, who became, however, the Minister of the Interior in the state of Prussia, which you recall had 60% of the police. That was on January 30th. On February 4th, they issued a decree, prepared by a prior government but not issued. Decree for the protection of the German people. Censor the press, the power to. Ban public meetings, the power to. And permit 3 months of protective custody. That is, before a court or police, the court could force the police to come up with a charge or not. In the next 2 weeks, 50,000 stormtroopers were added to the Prussian police as extra police. On the 24th, the headquarters of the Communist Party was raided. And they claimed, we now know falsely, that they found plans for an armed rebellion to be set off by attacks on public buildings. On February 27, the Parliament of Germany, the Reichstag, burst into fire. That evening they announced that it was caused by the communists. And on February 28th, mind you now, an election had been called for March 5th. On February 28th, they issued a decree for the protection of the people and state against communist acts of violence, suspending the basic rights, freedom of speech and assembly, and warrants necessary for searches. Second, they gave them the right to remove all state governments. 4,000 people were arrested, leading communists, all the communist members of the Reichstag, many trade union leaders, outspoken civil libertarians, brought to SA barracks, beaten, tortured, some killed. Under these circumstances, the March 5th election was held, and it was a free election. And the Nazis did not win a majority, even after all of that. But there were 81 communist deputies who were elected, and on March 6th, a new decree abolished the Communist Party and made them not eligible to take part in the parliament. On March 23rd, the Reichstag met and passed what was called an Enabling Act. It granted the parliament the right to enact laws, or rather the government, that is, Hitler and his ministers, the right to enact laws without the parliament. Let's go back to the word Gleichschaltung, bringing into line the whole society, that a minority, a large minority, 30% of the votes, wishes to impose upon it. What happened? On April 7th, governors were appointed for all the states. On April 7th, a law, now, not just a decree, a law, for the restoration of the civil service, the power to remove all school teachers, professors, judges, prosecutors, and prohibiting all communists and all Jews from participating in any of those posts. That's all the public employees. On May 2nd, trade unions were dissolved and replaced by the German Labor Front. The German Labor Front created an organization that translates as Strength Through Joy, which took under its control all voluntary organizations, chess clubs, football clubs, singing choirs, had to meet the requirements of this large movement headed by a small group of powerful people that could poll 30% of the vote. The government brought a case against the people who they claimed to have set fire to the Reichstag as an attempt to demonstrate to the many German people who are not members of that 30%, but others, that what they were doing was lawful, proper, and a response to the threat of an armed communist rebellion. A great movement took place outside Germany, with help inside, to conduct a parallel trial. So I'm saying, from the point of view of a lawyer now, this is late in the game. This is after much of the damage had been done. How was the story to be told to the world? The defendants were the leader of the communists in the Reichstag, 3 Bulgarian communists who were in the city, and 1 Dutchman who was found in the Reichstag when it was burning with his shirt off, being used as a flame or something. Turgler, the head of the Communist Party in Germany, in the Reichstag, had a solid alibi. He was nowhere near the place. The 3 Bulgarians had just arrived town before the day. No question they were not there either. This young Dutchman, by the time he turned up in court, was a drooling idiot. Could not say a word. Under the German legal system, the defendants had the right to question witnesses, something that in the American and British system is not possible. It was important because the Nazis assigned the lawyers to the defendants, and the defendants used the right. One in particular did, a Bulgarian communist named Dimitrov. The London parallel trial showed that the Reichstag was underlaid with tunnels, which had only 3 points of entrance. One, a powerhouse. The second, the president of the Reichstag's residence, which was Goering, the head of the Prussian police. And the third was into the Reichstag itself. The proofs of the trial showed that the fires were set in 11 different places using flammable substances. The trial in London pointed out to the world with supporting proofs that the Dutchman who they found there could not have set the fire himself, and that it was the Nazis who had done so. And the court, and perhaps the last such instance where this was possible, because the proofs had been shown to the whole world, acquitted Torgler and the 3 Bulgarians, convicted the drooling Dutch boy, beaten senseless, and executed him. And ruled that even though they acquitted them, it was the communists who had started the fire. Let us make 4 points now, quickly. The communists were, in fact, unarmed. There were no armed communists in Germany. There was no armed communist resistance. And in fact, as a good Marxist would say, there is a dialectical connection here. If they had been armed, they would not have dared do what they did. The Nazis were a national party. There were no parts in Germany where they weren't present in some strength, though there were places where they were stronger than others. Germany itself was an imperial country and had benefited from imperialism. There had been many peasants in Germany before industrialization, but they did not form a large, unemployable mass because they emigrated to the United States into lands where the native inhabitants had been murdered. And in fact, the German people, including the working people, had benefited to some degree from the benefits of the global imperial system. And let's make a last point. The left did not unite against the Nazis, not before this, and not until this very trial that we're talking about, a year after all of this had taken place. Yes, it is the case that democratic rights will not stop a movement backed by capital. And the Nazis, at the end, were backed by German capital. They had means of manipulation. They had means of persuasion. This is the days of radio, movies, and they had a brilliant manipulator of all of that, Goebbels. But to be in control, controlled down to the chess clubs, that required something else. And what they did. Let us then hope that unity in the defense of fundamental democratic rights is something that will not have to await the complete destruction of all of the organizations which give meaning to independent political life and thought among lawyers and intellectuals and the rest of us. Thank you.